Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by Sara Gon. Sara, how are you doing?
Well, thanks. I think we actually have cloudier weather than Cape Town. Amazing.
Amazing stuff. And we are also joined today by Mr. Marius Roodt. Marius, how are you?
How's Nick? How's Sara?
So let's start off with our first story today, and this is one that actually emerged from social media. It was a video which showed a group of people who, at the time, it was unclear exactly who they might be, although it was claimed that they were VIP protection officers for a senior government official. It's since been confirmed that they, in fact, are beating a number of people on the side of the road on the N1 highway. There's not much context as to how this sort of came about in the video, but the VIP protection officers are seen being extremely rough with a number of people who are sort of lying on the ground, helpless, having their heads stamped on, being kicked in the side. The IRR put out a statement condemning the recent incident, saying that regrettably such displays of irrational state violence are not surprising to many South Africans. The country has witnessed with minimal accountability the tragic deaths of hundreds of individuals in police custody, as well as the killing in public of people such as Collins Khoza and Petrus Michels. It has since been confirmed that the officers were part of Deputy President Paul Mashatile's VIP protection unit. Paul Mashatile issued a statement saying that they were his protection officers, and said, quote, "The Deputy President has become aware of the unfortunate incident involving members of the SA Police Service who are attached to his protection detail and civilians, which occurred in Johannesburg over the weekend. The Deputy President abhors any unnecessary use of force, particularly against unarmed civilians. The National Police Commissioner has promised a thorough investigation, articulated the conduct of police officers very well. Mashatile has appealed to the public to give police, quote, the necessary space to do their investigation." And he said that he has full confidence in Bheki Cele to investigate the situation. Marius, should we give the police a chance here? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, they need to be investigated, and I think the police are one of the arms that need to do the investigating. But I think, obviously, pressure has to remain on the police and make sure that the people who did this, they need to be brought to book. Because what happened, was absolutely disgusting. That you see, I think there were 3 guys there getting attacked, and the one guy looks like he's just been knocked out, and he's lying there, not doing anything. He's passed out, or he's in so much pain, he's just lying there, and he gets kicked in the side by one guy, another guy stamps on his head. So even if, let's assume, for argument's sake, that these guys were posing a threat to whoever was in this vehicle. Let's say they'd been driving dangerously and trying to running off the road. Let's just, for argument's sake, say that was the case. But now they've been pulled over, they're not a threat anymore, and they get attacked like that. That is assault with intent to do grievous bodily harm. That is, basically the worst thing you can do to a person except for murder or rape them. And somebody in a defense person was kicked like that, and just shows you the impunity that people operate with in this country. And unfortunately, if we just got a list of people who were killed by the security forces or the police in the last year or two, and we just read out those names, we'd probably be sitting here for 3 hours while we go through people's names who were killed for no reason by the police and so on. I mean, you mentioned Collins Khoza, that's, I think that's kind of, he epitomizes the state of this country. I mean, he was killed for doing nothing wrong during the lockdown. He was drinking a beer, which is not even illegal. You couldn't buy beer. But even if he had bought a beer, this shouldn't be a capital offense. And when he was killed, nobody lost their job for it. And Cyril Ramaphosa was asked about it. But Ramaphosa couldn't even name his name. Couldn't say, geez, like, it's a terrible thing that happened to Collins Khoza. All he said was, our guys were a bit over-enthusiastic. And I think that shows exactly what the state thinks about the people that they govern.
So Paul Mashatile has claimed that he was not in the convoy at the time, which then removes any possible justification that the VIP protection service might claim here, which is if they claim they can't even claim apparently then that they were protecting anyone, because the person they're supposed to protect was not there. So horrifying. And this is not the first time that we've heard stories or seen evidence of VIP protection officers behaving appallingly. I know there have been stories of motorists being attacked for having, giving the finger to protective officers, to VIP blue light convoys. There was a story once, and I can't remember whether it was proven or not, but that the protection officers had shot at another motorist for not getting out of the way of a blue light convoy. Just utter madness. This kind of footage, Sarah, it does give one echoes of apartheid security police beating people.
Actually, it's you know what it really does is, I think we all truly loathe the blue light brigades. They are way too large for the people they are protecting. There are too many of them. I think if somebody said, where should we put these VIP guys in jail, and we would say with the pedophiles, because they are just, they remind one of sort of egregious power which is undeserving. I mean, I think that alone would, no one will actually pay attention to whatever they allege the guys that they beat up did that justify their activity. The other thing, I mean, there's an element that also says, in this day and age, if you park all over the road to beat people up, somebody's going to film it. So very smart. And the other was, I don't know if you saw the automatic weapons they were carrying. I mean, whoever they were beating up had no chance against them for whatever they did or didn't do. No, they've got to look. The police should be able to wrap this up fairly quickly. The evidence is there. The number plates are there. The presumably they'll be able to interview the victims. No, it's the big man politics mixed with toxic masculinity, and it's all rather revolting. And I think the rest of us, I think we actually have a prejudice towards the guys who perform this function.
No, and they really don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. As we've seen in these previous cases, there have been so many times when people in law enforcement have gotten away with treating people appallingly and abusing their rights and hurting them with very little accountability. And I think it's extremely important that media, civil society, the public holds the government to account on this one. It doesn't let the story go away, because my cynical mind tells me that there's going to be asking for calm, there's going to be promises of investigations, and then a little bit like what happened in the Collins Causa case, the thing will sort of drift away like mist, and no one will be named responsible. So it's very important that the names of all of the police, of the officers involved in this, I think, is revealed publicly, and that journalists keep an eye on it to keep track of it. Just total sort of medieval aristocracy beating up the peasantry kind of vibes here. It's just disgusting and not worthy of a republic where citizens are free. Marius, any final thoughts?
No, just, yeah, I mean, I think you guys are spot on, and I think it's the way the government, when Collins Causa died, was at the same time when George Floyd died. And I remember the government released these statements about BLM and, the South African government's behind Black Lives Matter. The South African police kill more people per capita than the US or the Brazilian police, who are generally thought of as being the most violent police forces in the world. And the South African police kills more people on a per capita basis than either of those police services or police forces. So it just shows you what, I mean, we have a big problem with this kind of thing in South Africa. I mean, it's not an easily solvable issue, and we all know that there's very big issues with crime and stuff in South Africa, but I think the police simply aren't cut out for the job of, actually managing crime in South Africa. And as I said, there's some very complex reasons for that. But I mean, I don't think there's anybody who's even trying to fix the issues that come with that kind of thing in South Africa. So it's all quite depressing. And I hope that these guys do get brought to book and, get kicked out the police. But there's got a lot of reforms got to happen here. I mean, the fact that they thought they could treat other people like this is already telling you something. And no matter what those guys did, kicking them on the ground like that, it's assault. There's no doubt in my mind. Even if those guys had committed the crime, that's not what you do to somebody who's lying on the ground and not posing any threat to anybody.
Yeah, even if they were, I don't know, and I doubt this, but even if they were some kind of assassins, they had been disarmed. They were on the ground. You don't
Yeah.
stamp on someone's head. But anyway, so obviously we're going to keep an eye on that, and hopefully, as I said, it doesn't disappear from the mainstream media. Right, let's go on to, I think, kind of a bit of a general discussion on the state of the opposition in the country. So let's start off with by-elections, where there were a bunch of by-elections last week. We made fun of a particular EFF candidate for not getting a single vote in a ward in Middelburg, which was just kind of very low effort, I thought, because it means he didn't even vote for himself. But Marius, do you just want to run us through some of the results of those by-elections last week? Most of them weren't that important.
Yeah, so I mean, just to one thing, I never defend the EFF. I mean, this is, you must record this. But to be fair to the chap in the EFF who didn't get single votes, I believe that you don't necessarily have to live in a ward where you stand. You just have to live in the same municipality. So, but it still means this guy didn't manage to persuade even one person. I mean, I don't know how much campaigning he could have done, or if he put up any posters or anything.
Yeah, you'd think if the EFF had a branch there, that they would at least have one member who could have voted for him, even if he wasn't.
Exactly. Exactly. You'd thought one guy. So, but yeah, there was pretty much there were probably two wards or two by-elections where some interesting stuff. One was in Joburg ward. I can't remember which ward it was exactly, but it's in Ennerdale, which is generally was a sort of a what you call a coloured ward, mainly coloured people over there. The PA won the ward on last week. They took it from the ANC, and they got nearly 50% of the vote on Wednesday. So shows that the PA is definitely making inroads around the country. The PA now has got 9 seats on the Joburg City Council, up from 8. And then there were 3 by-elections in Nkosi Langibelele. I think that's how it's basically Escort. I think I'm correct. They were IFP held seats. They were there had to be by-elections because the IFP kicked out a couple of councillors for apparently being bribed by the ANC and going to vote against an IFP mayor, so all these kind of shenanigans. But what was interesting there, the IFP held on to 2 of the seats, but lost one to the ANC. So while it has seemed that the ANC's been kind of getting hammered in KwaZulu-Natal, just basically across the board, they've been getting, every single by-election they've been losing to the IFP or doing very badly. This is one where the ANC they did all right, so they took a ward off the IFP. So, maybe the ANC's managed to kind of staunch the bleeding in KwaZulu-Natal, but I'm not too sure.
Well, every other by-election on the same day had the IFP increase their majority. It was just also one particular ward, right, where they went backwards.
Yeah, and I mean, where they did increase the majority, that was also pretty small. There wasn't, these landslide kind of things that went up by 1 or 2 percentage points. And then the DA held on to 4 wards, but in kind of places that you'd expect it to was, pretty safe places. I mean, in that ward where the EFF guy didn't get a single vote, the DA got over 90% of the votes. There was another ward in Cape Town where DA also got over 90% of the votes. So they didn't really face much opposition in those places. But I mean, if you're getting more than 90%, that's what the kind of numbers that the ANC racks up in rural Eastern Cape and so on, or what the governing party in North Korea gets. So it's quite interesting sometimes.
I'm sure the DA will love that comparison. So I've been thinking a little bit about by-elections recently, and I'm sort of starting to slide into the camp of they're useful but not that useful for kind of predicting elections, because I think what's happened in previous years in South Africa, there was only basically one party which was very good at fighting by-elections, and that was the DA. And so they often outperformed when it came to by-elections. And I think actually to a certain degree, they may have lost that edge a bit. I think some of the smaller parties like the PA have proven that they are very good at fighting by-elections. And I also think that often, these things are governed by local candidates and stuff far more than is recognized. A lot of these wards have very complicated histories where someone defected to someone, or the last councillor was caught, drunk with prostitutes and this, or just there's often like a crazy local story that doesn't get into the media. And so I wonder how much, how indicative of trends some of these are. But we shall see. I'd love to see more national polling.
I think you're right. Just as I said before, I think comparing like a by-election and a national poll. National poll is kind of like your meteorological snapshot. It takes the radar view of the country and shows you where things are going. Where a by-election is more like a windsock, and it tells you which way the wind's blowing. And a good meteorologist will be able to tell you, well, if the wind is coming from this direction at this time of year, this is probably what's going to happen. Doesn't mean it will happen, but this is the weather you can expect. And I think you have to take these you have to take them, look at them holistically. It doesn't help to look at what happened in a ward in Port St. John's and say, oh, the ANC lost 20 percentage points. That means they stuffed. But I think you've got to, like what's been happening in KwaZulu-Natal, where the ANC's been losing almost every single ward. It's been going backwards significantly.
Yeah. And I think just before I come to you, Sara, one of the things I'd like to add on that is that I think the IFP in particular are actually kind of difficult. Their supporters tend to be the kind of difficult to poll in samples because they're often quite rural and they're the most likely to sort of be disconnected from like databases of numbers and things like that. So I wouldn't, and you can see this in that the IFP often polls at like 2 or 3%, and then they end up getting like 4 or 5% in an election, which is not a huge difference, but enough to make a difference in KZN in particular. So I think by-elections, when looking at the IFP, are actually particularly useful. Sara, what do you make of all this? How do you read these by-elections? How you read the general trends of by-elections recently?
I think the limitation, as you said, is basically you're looking at municipal elections for a candidate representing wards, whereas national, it's in a way it's a more complicated scenario than a national or provincial by-election. A provincial election, because it's pure numbers, or give or take. I know there's complexity, but it's largely numbers. So it's very difficult, or perhaps a little unreliable, to rely on the one for the other. You can just get a sense perhaps of trends, of changes, etc., etc. As you said, in the way that the IFP has taken wards off the ANC, there may or may not be significance in the numbers, the percentages that the parties go up by. But we're already seeing a way of diminishing the number of councillors by having an IFP councillor in Natal and an ACDP councillor in Natal gunned down, assassinated. I mean, let's put this simply. So, and KwaZulu-Natal is probably the world capital for municipal councillor assassinations. And I think that is probably going to get nastier just because the stakes are so high in the next election. I think even if gunning down someone doesn't actually provide or result in any particular benefit for the party behind the assassination. I think the one IFP ANC election is by-election, as far as I know, IFP complained bitterly about sort of finucare of the voting process. I don't know how far they've gone with it, but I think we're going to see a lot more ugly stuff increasingly because the ANC is going to be desperate not to be out of power. It doesn't matter what coalition it has to establish.
In the ward that the PA won in Johannesburg, the DA essentially accused the PA of fiddling with the process because the DA candidate met with Gayton McKenzie, I think it was a week or something before the election was to take place, and then suddenly announced that actually he wasn't going to do it and he was standing down and then that he was moving to Cape Town. So they couldn't replace him. And so the DA essentially were on the ballot with a candidate who had said that he wasn't going to be the councillor and would resign immediately. Which, who knows what Gayton said to him, but it's not a good look, is it?
It's not a good look. And let's put it this way, the DA is not going to chase the man if he goes to Cape Town, but if it were the ANC, I would immigrate.
So anyway, don't keep a watch on, but in light of this, the sort of as we can see, there's lots of churn going on in our politics, and the question remains now: what are the opposition parties going to do when it comes to the 2024 election? No one's going to be able to form a majority, and even if the ANC does, at the bottom end of what any poll has ever shown, like maybe 38% or something, absolute disaster for the ANC. It's still going to be difficult to form a coalition against them. So there is now, as part of the DA's Moonshot Pact thing, they are talking about holding a national convention with a group of other parties The Action SA is going to be there. Who are they called? The Freedom Front Plus are going to be there. A number of other smaller parties, including the National Freedom Party, I think, which is very odd. And this convention is going to be, the IFP will be there, and the UIM will be there, and the SNP, Spectrum National Party, who I've never heard of, all going to be there. Probably some people from civil society. Marius, what do you think? How do you think this thing is going to shake out? Do you think that there's going to be a solid coalition bloc, kind of, I guess, laying off each other going into the next national election?
The thing with our system, our proportional representation system, is that it is pretty much a zero-sum thing. So if somebody decides not to vote for the DA and rather vote for Action SA because, the DA, they feel the DA didn't campaign hard enough against Action SA, whatever the case is, that's it's a loss for the DA. We don't have first past the post constituency seats where these kind of electoral pacts would probably make more sense. I think what's an electoral pact with our system, as I said beforehand, doesn't really make all that sense. I think what could make more sense is if these parties, I mean, we obviously have to wait to see what comes out after this national convention. So, we support 4 values, say, non-racialism, the free markets, whatever the case is, come up with things like opposed to what the ANC, the EFF stands for. And we will try to form a government after 2024, and we will come, with proper binding agreements, so we don't have these very chaotic coalitions we've had across the municipalities in South Africa. But I think maybe it's also a way people can think, well, I think they know if you vote for this party, it's going to be against the ANC and the EFF. If that's kind of parties you don't like, and you are voting for sort of free markets, people who support non-racialism, whatever the case is. So it looks pretty interesting. I'm not sure about people like the UIM being there, who've got a handful of seats across the country, and Spectrum National Party, who I don't think has got a seat anywhere. It's quite interesting. And National Freedom Party, the less said about them, the better, I think. But I see DP and Musi Maimani's outfit, Build One South Africa, are going to be there as observers. I was quite surprised that the ACDP wasn't there, because they've always been a pretty solid member of anti-ANC coalitions across South Africa.
Yeah,
I mean, they were part of that Cape Town coalition in 2006, and they've always, I think they did vote for the ANC candidates in the last Joburg mayoral election. For Tapelo Ahmad, the guy before Kabelo Gwamanda. But I think there were 2 guys who voted for what's his name, Tapelo Ahmad, but I think there was something fishy, like the ACDP councillors had been bribed or something strange happened there. So generally, I mean, the ACDP is pretty much a solid member of any anti-ANC coalition. So, but I think this does show how politics is maybe starting to coalesce around a certain opposition bloc. And I think this does happen around the world in countries where coalitions are common. You get 2 parties, they're separate, they have completely separate identities, but generally they're going to work together in coalition. They've got kind of broad goals, but they differ on certain issues. So I think this is maybe a sign of our politics maturing, but it's obviously something we're still going to have to keep an eye on. And I think it is quite exciting, and we'll have to see if more parties join.
So I suspect that any thing they coalesce around will be far less coherent than what you just outlined, Marius. And I suspect it's going to be, we will not form a government with the ANC or EFF. Something like that.
I think there'll be enough for some people to vote for. I mean, that'd be good enough for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Sara, what do you make of this? Do you think that this convention thing will sort of crystallize the battlefield, the electoral battlefield going forward?
I don't know. I think it's a bit up in the air, but I think the holding of it is important, because it's a sign that in the chaos of the last few years at municipal level, I think the opposition parties by and large have understood that they have to start to look a bit mature and constructive. And I think there's also an element of wanting to be seen to be at the convention, so that you're favorably looked upon as a very small party. So what exactly will come out of it, I don't know. But I think it is part of that maturing process, and the realization that we cannot take for granted that the ANC will lose power, and that they actually do have to pull themselves toward themselves to attract the votes that would make the difference. So let's call it a sort of growing up a bit on the coalition issue.
Right. Okay, let's move on to our last story.
Just one thing I want to say that I think South Africa also needs to start thinking about looking around the world and seeing how coalitions have worked there. There's a kind of Israel and Ireland are doing it with a kind of a rotational premiership, where parties that come into the coalition have turns being the head of government. And I think maybe that's something, we should think about it. Maybe John Steenhuisen has a go for a year and a half to be president of South Africa, then him Mashaba gets a go for a year and a half. And take turns doing that kind of thing. I think we need to start thinking out of the box though with these kind of things, because that has seemed to be a bit of a sticking point often, is about which positions go to which parties.
Sorting out egos may be a big thing. Mollifying.
Good luck to them with that one. Okay, let's move on to our last story, and this is regarding some investigative work done by the amaBhungane investigative group of journalists who were attempting to publish a report based on some documents that were given to them by what they say is a whistleblower inside the Motti group of companies. The Motti group, upon hearing of this attempt to sort of publish this report, got an ex parte application from the court. That is an application where you don't have to notify the other party, saying that the stuff can't be released, that the documents were obtained improperly, and that nothing should be published regarding them. This was challenged by amaBhungane in court, and the judge at the High Court has just ruled that the previous order was a gross abuse of the court system, and that they should, never mind whether you should gag journalists in the first place, which he says is also a problem, but you also the way that this court process was done was completely improper. The judge, Sutherland, said, quote, "The elephant in this case is not press freedom or violation of privacy. Rather, it is the most egregious abuse of the process of court. It is manifest that the order granted on the 1st of June should never have been sought ex parte, still less granted. There is not a smidgen of justification for it being brought ex parte." Sarah, what do you make of this story?
Well, Roland Sutherland is a very measured sort of man. I mean, I used to do a bit of work with him, and not easily ruffled. So to get as angry as he did over this is quite something. The only thing he agreed to, he supported nothing. He said the demand by the Motti group that they undertake that they be interdicted to preserve the original documentation is an undertaking amaBhungane had given anyway. So the fact that it's got it, and that it's going to publish, and it meets all the requirements for free speech and the publication of stuff that's in the interest of the media, that's met. If that's met, that's what they're allowed to do. So the getting an interdict to try and stop them from publishing was, you'd have to have very much better grounds than whatever grounds he seems to have had. But the other thing is how, ex parte applications are done. They're not common. They're done where the notification to the other side that runs the risk of somebody fleeing the country or killing somebody or whatever it may be. There must be some immediate real risk that something untoward will happen to the detriment of the applicant. That doesn't happen often. But this is certainly not the sort of thing. I mean, amaBhungane is a reputable, whether you like what they do or not, as a company, they're a reputable group of people. They have credentials in the media, and how they manage to get a single is either an incompetent judge, or a bribe judge, or an incompetent bribe judge. I don't know how they manage to do that. That's what I think that Sutherland was so irate about.
Yeah, that to me is what's kind of weird about all this, Marius. It's the reasons for preventing the publication of something. You got to, especially when it's into sort of investigative work, you got to have a really good reason, and it looks like here there really wasn't one. And it's a little bit worrying to me. I'm glad that the High Court, basically gave this a slap, but it is a little bit worrying to me that the low courts did grant this. Marius, do you have any thoughts before we close up the episode?
No, I agree with you, and it's obviously a way that people who don't want their wrongdoing to be brought to light will go to courts. I mean, President Zuma was pretty good with that, the so-called Stalingrad strategy. But that's obviously not an option for most people most people probably can't even afford one day of an advocate in one of the high courts, the 100,000 rand a day or whatever it is. So it's only people with basically, bottomless pockets who can do it. So somebody like Jacob Zuma, who's got access to the resources of the state through having been president of the country and former president and so on, can do it. But at least this has happened. Hopefully these kind of frivolous lawsuits or frivolous actions for the court won't be too common. Because I think maybe, especially a small organization would maybe, I think amaBhungane is fairly well resourced, but small organizations would think twice maybe about trying to report on something if they're worried about getting sued. Because a big, if they win, but they don't get the costs awarded or whatever the case is, what you owe the lawyers can probably sink a lot of organizations.
That's the intention of
it.
Yeah, no, and that's obviously something we want to avoid. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. There will be a Daily Friend wrap episode tomorrow coming out at 5 o'clock. So we'll see you then. And anyway, have a lovely day. Cheers, everyone.